Bobby Manning and John Zannis back for yet another Garden Report. I feel like we're doing this every day. There's not breaking news, but there's breaking buzz surrounding the Celtics. Enough, at least, for us to get on here and talk about, squeezing it in just before John has to pick up his daughter at soccer practice, and Bobby Manning has to lace up the high tops and pump up his Reeboks and head out onto the court and play pickup basketball tonight. But there's some fun stuff to talk about. A lot coming courtesy. There's a little bit of Kevin Durant stuff coming out earlier in the day from Adrian Wojnarowski, but a really good, very detailed report from Keith Smith of Celtics blog, colleague of Bobby Manning's, and very cool stuff just kind of surrounding a lot of the pieces in and around the Celtics and things that could be moved. We also had Bobby Manning talking to Danilo Gallinari earlier today at an event. We'll talk about that. And Kyrie Irving lands in Dallas. So a lot of good stuff to talk about. We figured it would be worth jumping on here and kind of chopping it up. So, Bobby, I wanted to kind of start. I know Durant is the biggest name, but I wanted to start with kind of what I believe was the biggest nugget out of Keith's story, is that Grant Williams, who is many deem untouchable, not untouchable, many deem safe. There's always been the assumption Grant's coming back. They'll figure it out. They'll split the difference in the middle. And according to Keith and according to sources in his report, Grant's looking for $18 to $20 million a year next year, wants to play more. Maybe this isn't the place for him. Him signing here or returning is far from a certainty. And I would totally understand it if his goal is to kind of dig in and establish himself as a kind of a bigger entity than he is now. I mean, he's obviously playing behind a bunch of players. The Celtics extended Al Horford. I'm not sure what his path to starting is. It could be here next year alongside Rob. You never know if Al were to move to the bench as he kind of continues to get older and plays out last couple of years of his extension. But this one is interesting, Bobby, and this is one I've kind of been kicking around for a bit as a possibility. If the Celtics really start to believe that he's going to walk for nothing, you might have to entertain getting rid of him, even if it does disrupt chemistry or possibly even, makes you worse. You do have to always be looking to the future, right? And you have to make sure that if you lose an asset, you're getting something back in return.
Yeah, and you always have to assess how much value your guy has, and I think that's probably what's going on here. You also see Derek White mentioned in that piece, calls coming in about him. It doesn't seem like he's a guy who would move, but kind of shows what goes on this time of year in terms of everybody weighing everything. I think the Celtics have pretty much been in contact with every team in the NBA over the last couple weeks here, which is pretty normal. You always wondered in the back of your mind whether Grant was going to be a possible movement piece at this point, though, because you've heard they're not going to move a rotation guy, that they're just going to tinker around the edges, and you certainly think that they would love Grant because going back to the summer, I think they made a serious effort to re-sign him in the low teens, which still seems like a feasible place that they could sign him this offseason. The only difference is you have Jaylen Brown on a trajectory to potentially make supermax money now. So does that price out Grant as you start to stack up your books and what your team might cost into the future? Then you might be looking at the possibility of can you get a replacement right now? That's a huge factor, I think. And then can you sell high on Grant right now? I think that's less of a possibility than, say, the end of November when he was shooting 45% from three and 50% from the field.
I don't think teams view things that way. I think fans view things that way, Bobby. I don't think teams look at Grant struggling for a month and discount the body of work on what he's done in the past, what he did last year, and some of the things that he does well. I think people know what they're getting. I think you can look at, okay. I mean, look.
What's a little different with Grant? Because he's had one good year. One great year, rather.
He's never had a great year.
But last year he was great.
He's not great. We have, again, great. This is how Phenomenal was born. Grant Williams has never been great, and he'll never be great.
Last year he was one of the 10 most switchable guys in the league.
Not great. Grant Williams is
40%, 42% from three.
He's good. He's not great. Great is reserved for great. Okay. But again, this is a semantic argument. It's not a great. I think, again, so this is kind of the whole Grant conversation, honestly. I think there's a whole faction of people that believe, great, or beyond, what what numbers would show you, or whatever it is. And again, it's not all just counting stats, but believe that there's the myth of Grant Williams and what he does. Oh, the Giannis stopper, the this, the that, Jokic, all of this stuff. And it's created this legend around Grant Williams, which I think is way more than what he actually is. What he really is a really good, versatile player that I think a lot of teams and GMs understand that and respect and value it. The question was always, at what dollar figure are you doing that? But I don't know I really don't know. The other thing is, I don't know if you're sending him to a team that believes in him and wants to keep him long term, or a team that just simply wants to clear a 3-year contract off their books, like a Derek White deal, and bring in somebody who they may or may not have to commit to next year, and that's preferable to them. So you could see taking in something that you could hold on to. Also, Keith's report, the source said that the Celtics might be looking exactly for that sort of thing, is replace him for someone that they can keep for a few years down the road if they're not going to bring Grant back.
Yeah, and I've thought of people down the line that you could potentially use to leverage Grant, which I think is probably the way to go. It makes this year's team a little more expensive, but that's why I like the idea of a Jakob Poeltl, who you could maybe re-sign and be happier with at a higher dollar figure than Grant, potentially there, or go after another guy who a team doesn't want to keep, like a PJ Washington, who might not be as good as Grant, but of course wouldn't cost as much as Grant either. If you're trying to keep costs low, but still keep a rotation guy in there.
He's in the Grant ballpark. That's exactly it. That is the Grant ballpark right there. And again, I think we have built Grant into a kind of a greater entity than he actually is. I mean, he's a good player. He's a role player. But maybe he starts on a weak team. I don't know if he's a starter on a contending team. According to Keith's report, a couple of things. One of the sources, Grant wants a lot of money. He thinks 18 to 20 is waiting for him in free agency and wants to play more, probably start, according to the source. Not sure either one of those things will happen with Boston. And then the source also continues, or a source, Brad Stevens will move Williams if he can get a comparable player that's under team control for a couple of years. So based off of that, and I know some things you've been hearing as well, you have to kind of get the feeling that the Celtics are not in love with Grant, in the sense that they also think he's fine. I think the Celtics thinking is more in line with my thinking. Good. I like this guy. He's great. Not breaking the bank for him, not making him any promises. And I can absolutely,
they didn't draft
I'll
him.
absolutely swap him out if I can pull something else in here. Yeah.
Well, Brad specifically didn't draft him.
Right.
And he moved on from Romeo Langford from that same draft. He moved on from Carson Edwards, and who's the other guy they picked in that draft? There was another first rounder, wasn't there? No, just Romeo, just Grant. Who else did they move on from? Neesmith, another guy that they didn't pick. So he's done this with past players. None of those guys broke through into the rotation and impacted the team like Grant did. But they were also guys whose contracts were going to be heading up in a year or two, and whose value didn't hit a great point, and they traded them up into some veterans. Now, that required first-round picks in both of those cases, actually 2 in Derek White's case with the Langford trade. So you could get extra aggressive with Grant right now and try to upgrade on him, which wouldn't be easy.
That's what I was suggesting. See if you can roll it up.
Yeah, I wonder if you could roll it up into a Poeltl, because Poeltl's not quite the same player as Grant. It's a much different skill set, but if they want to go double big, if they want to go double big and play that style, maybe it makes some sense.
Forget double big. You have to seriously recognize that you have to upgrade this front court at some point, because it's going to expire. You feel pretty good, obviously, about your guards. You're at the guard position right now, and obviously you have 2 of the best young wings in the game, but you have massive question marks. So again, it's not insurance as much as it is replacements. Like, you need a Horford replacement. Honestly, I don't think you can continue. It's not that Horford is gone. I think you have to start thinking of Horford's minutes as unsustainable. Al Horford in the last couple of years before he rides off into the sunset really should be playing 15, 18, 20 minutes a game max and probably not starting. And you are going to have to bring in somebody who's going to play some serious minutes. And if you're concerned about Rob Williams, you've really, I mean, and his ongoing health issues, you've got to address that sooner than later. So yes, if you can roll up, even if it's a different style of player, you can roll Grant and something else into a Pirtle and then tell them, yeah, we'll work you in this year and you'll be starting next year. No question about it. Great. Do it.
Yeah, but that's where you get into some worries about shaking up the room or shaking up what you've done that so far that works. Which Pirtle, everything you hear reported about him is that he wants his big payday and he wants a significant role in the team. And when the Celtics are healthy, he's not going to play a lot. You could say the same thing about PJ Washington, whose rookie deal's coming up and who, hasn't always had the biggest role in Charlotte either. I'm sure he's looking for a destination where he could maybe be a more forefront player, though he's been in such a bad situation this year. I'm sure that's a little different for him. You could say the same about Pearl as well, I guess. There's a lot of different guys you could look at in terms of stepping into Grant's position, but what's the goal? How many of these guys could be better than Grant? Or is it just about making the roster cheaper? Because that's why I say leverage him. You can have both. Go get a Washington or go get a Vanderbilt or go get a Pirtle in addition to having Grant this year. And if you have to say goodbye to Grant at the end of the year,
that's what I said. Yes, that's what I think makes the most sense is eat it this year and then just have the option to not let Grant sit, let him sift out offers. If he gets his 18-20, you say bye. If he's still around for 10-11,
you have matching power.
Yeah, if you have matching power, if you want it, and if he's still around for 10, 11, 12 because he couldn't get what he thought he was going to get on the open market, you can say, yeah, let's hold on to that.
Like what names are we really talking about here? Washington, a little bit of a flashy name. I don't think he's as good.
I think Olynyk is another possibility.
Olynyk, I don't hate that one, but so far through their Celtics careers, did you like Olynyk or did you like Grant more?
So here's the thing. It all is a matter of Olynyk is a better overall offensive player. He's not a good defensive player. When he was here, he just hacked, and everybody knows that. And if you want to have a good defensive identity, obviously when he's out there, but again, you're talking about people playing against reserves, at this point. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the type of player because he's cheaper. And you do have him for a couple of years and he fits that kind of stretch 4 position. He's got some size. That's about it, and he's a good offensive player. That might be the ballpark of what you would be looking for. I don't know if it makes you better, but it makes you better than not having either player going into the future, right?
Yeah.
You have to weigh everything. Everyone's looking at it straight up, but like if Grant is going to walk because he's going to be given either wanted or be given a number that's much greater than where you're willing to go, then you have to count your losses and figure out what else can I do?
Yeah, like Mo Bamba, I wouldn't be excited about that. John Collins' salary is so much higher. We've kicked that around in the past. $23 million compared to $4 million is a tough bridge to gap. And if you're worried about paying Grant upwards of $20 million, I don't think you want to pay Collins $23 million unless you really love him. And they've been connected to him in the past.
By the way, Kelly Olynyk is only 31. I think people think he's much, much, much older.
It's amazing he's been around a decade, though.
Right?
He's looking great this year. You brought that up originally before the report even came out, and I didn't like the sound of it at the time, but he is playing really well.
He's having an awesome year. Yeah.
The only thing I can say is that you had that report today that Utah's asking prices are outrageous, and
but that's Danny. You're always going to say it's outrageous. I mean, you know what I mean? It's like that's always setting the bar. It doesn't mean it's real or not real. It's just a matter of whether they feel better about having a player like that under team control for a couple of years at a manageable number, or they're just looking to clear even more space and more space and more space. But I mean, again, you're looking at a guy who's, shooting 40% from 3.
He's a legit 7-footer.
he's 6'10", 6'11", 12 points a game this year, 28 minutes. I mean, that's what you're looking for here. You're looking for 25 minutes off the bench, 10, 11, 12 points. And again, I mean, Grant's not far off from that, but he's not scoring as well. And you've seen a little bit of the dip, and you've seen some teams make some adjustments. Kelly Olynyk is, for what it's worth, fairly proven in terms of offensively. His numbers really don't deviate much year over year. I mean, he's kind of this is kind of who he is. You really do know what you're getting.
Yeah, he got hurt last year and kind of had a rough season to wrap his Detroit career. But
And I'm not advocating doing this. All I'm saying is that's a possibility.
Well, no, out of all the names we're kicking around, you can play him next to Rob, which isn't the case with Pirtle.
Right.
You can play him next to Al, of course.
Yeah.
Or you could play him at center by himself in second units. And he brings a much different skill set than Cornette, who I guess you'd have to trade in that. The $12 million would probably be I mean, if you throw 4 in for Grant and then Gallinari 6, that probably gets you pretty close, if not there. So you can do it. It's just, do you want Olynyk in addition to Grant, or do you want to swap those out? And does the Jazz even look at Grant as that much value in a trade to help? Or could you substitute those with picks? There's a bunch of different ways you could go about this. And at my core, I don't love giving up Grant when he was your front man on Durant round 1, when he was your front man on Giannis round 2. That's a real piece to lose, I think, going into the playoffs when you're playing so many big bodies that you really need a guy like Grant to defend. Even Embiid, if you run into a series against him, Grant's such a useful piece. And you know what he gives you on that end. It stinks seeing him struggle the way he does offensively right now. And he's really in this deep, deep hole. And you're going to get to the offseason and face a tough decision on him. But for right now, when you're all in on this championship squad, I have a tough time parting with them. And listen, John, I was the first on the show to say he's looking for that $20 million. I don't know if he's going to get there anymore.
Yeah.
So can you keep him at 12, 13?
Like I said, I've never thought it, but yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Yeah. It only takes one. And if the Celtics really, honestly, this was my belief. They've really drawn a line. And I think that line is below what Grant, even the low of what Grant could get. I think he'll find a 14, 15 out there, probably, because it only takes one. I think that's about right.
Playoffs or something, yeah.
I think it's about right. But like I said, I really used a contract of like Brandon Clark as a barometer for like where I thought someone of Grant's stature is worth, and that was 4 and 52. I think that's exactly where it came in at about 13 million per. And I think that if they did that, they'd be done, and you wouldn't be having this conversation right now. But they're not, so that's where you're at. And the Celtics clearly didn't want to get there, didn't want to go wherever it would go. So it's interesting because here's why it's interesting. Rather than discuss Grant has flexibility on the court, you have flexibility if he's part of trades now. If the assumption was, as we were saying on the show last time, Bobby, Gallinari, Pritchard, and a couple of seconds might be all they're willing to deal if they're not going to deal a rotation player. If that was the case, there's very little you could do. But now if you're throwing a Grant Williams into the mix, all of a sudden your options have changed a tad, because now Grant Williams with Pritchard and a first-round pick ups the ante of the type of player that you could potentially get back. Whereas before you were really talking about, I don't know what's left, what garbage is left for whatever I can clear out for these pieces I'm not really using right now. So it does open possibilities.
Yeah, and I wonder who wants him. The teams with cap, you could understand a Charlotte going after him if they're going to reload around their draft pick next year and bring all these guys back, they're veterans. But they have the cap space to do it in the offseason. Same with Detroit, same with San Antonio. So those teams that could go get him in the summer, I don't think they're giving up much for him now, unless it's a guy like Pirtle who they're going to give up anyway. I can't get away from the Pirtle thing. I know the teams downplayed it a lot. Fisher said they're in on him still, again, in that latest report. And the fact that they have that 2028 owed to the Spurs gives them a lot more flexibility in a deal with them than they have with other teams. Because you can't trade 2028 to other teams, but you can go to the Spurs and say, all right, we'll just give you 2028 unprotected. And there you go. And that's a plus over if the Spurs are looking at now and saying, all right, Brown and Tatum are probably going to be there in 2028. Maybe we don't end up even seeing that pick, but we will if they amend it, plus another pick coming over. I know they want 2 firsts for Pearl. It doesn't sound like a lot's been actually offered toward that asking price yet. They obviously sat on keeping him last year, and they've said that they'll keep him if they don't find a deal that's suitable because they have all that cap space. But he intrigues me. He's so good on offense. He's such a great rebounder. I know he's not a huge impactful defender, but he's 7'1".
Yeah.
He gives you a lot of what you already have right now at that position. If Rob goes down and you got to throw Jakob Poeltl in there, you feel great about that. Plus a great pick and roll finisher. I can already dream of Tatum going around his screens and finding him on the roll for a bunch of easy baskets. And what are they missing most offensively this year, John?
I mean, you can argue shooting, but
no, they have shooting.
Yeah.
Easy baskets inside. Throw it to a guy.
They've always had that problem.
Throw it to a guy and let him finish at the rim. If you have a guy in Poeltl who can give you 14 points every night doing that, that's a big plus and something that they don't have. I've always liked the Poeltl idea. I know it's expensive. I know it's a luxury, but you're going all in right now. And even if it's a rental, I think he helps you so much with things that you're missing right now. And that biggest vulnerability of losing a big man in the postseason and not having anything to replace him with. You really going to go to the buyout for your center? Like Nerlens Noel? Did that intrigue you at all?
No, none of that stuff. But that's the thing is like, it really comes down to, and again, that's the thing is you don't know what Brad is thinking. You don't know whether or not he looks at this team and thinks he's got enough. You don't know how much of an eye he has on the future in addition to this year. And so the Grant stuff would make sense in that case. You don't know, just how much they're willing to give up. There's other names we've talked about as possible trade chips. It is, and I want to get to one that's very interesting in Keith's report, a player who is supposedly not available, but I actually think the very fact that he's being talked about as not available makes him available, and I'll explain that in just a second. No, because I really do. I really thought that was an interesting aspect of this. So we'll get to that in a second, but first I want to tell you about something very special. Bobby, what do I want to tell the people about?
HelloFresh?
Kinda. There it is. HelloFresh. If you haven't gotten this already, I want you to think about doing it. I got to go make dinner as soon as this is done. And I know, check out Josue Pavone's Instagram. Say he was rocking some heavy duty HelloFresh action today. And Josue is a big fan. Of this particular thing. It's America's #1 meal kit, and it's that way for a reason. Remember those New Year's goals you promised you'd stick to? HelloFresh is there to help you get them done. It gives you a chance to customize meals the way you want them. Whatever you want to do, swap out your protein, swap out your vegetables, tons of different menu options so you don't get into like weird like recipe fatigue. You keep making the same stuff over and over again. This is a really great way to change things up, and they're always changing things up too. And that's really great, particularly if you're trying to eat healthy, because it's really hard to kind of keep coming up with new ideas for healthy sort of options. And HelloFresh has been great. That's the meal kit that I got, and I really dug it. So if you want to check it out, really good deal being offered through the Garden Report right now. Go to HelloFresh.com/Garden65 and use the code Garden65 for 65% off your entire order plus free shipping. Once again, 65% off the entire order if you go to HelloFresh.com/Garden, use the code Garden65. If you do support our sponsors, as always, we'll send you a t-shirt. That's how we do it here on the Garden Report. So another part of Keith's article I wanted to get to here, and we will get to Kevin Durant. There's not a lot of stuff on the Kevin Durant front, and we've talked about it a great deal over the last few days. If we had something to move the needle on it, we would talk about it, but there's a couple nuggets there as well. But we'll start off with Derek White. This is another interesting part of Keith's story here on Celtic Blog. Rival teams are calling Boston about Derek White, and only, as Keith says, only to be shut down. One team who inquired says, "We thought with all their guard depth that White might be available. He's not untouchable." Uh-oh. Bobby, take it 1 second.
Yeah, so Derek White, in this report, as John was saying there, they've received calls on him. Keith reported, and they're not I don't think they're looking to move a White. They just paid an ample amount last trade deadline to go get him in 2 future first round pick rights as the Spurs, plus all those players that they sent out. He's been a big part of what they've done. Keith says Clippers, Mavericks before the Irving trade, Magic and Nuggets among the teams to call on White. None of the talks got particularly close. Boston wants win now players and at least one first round pick in exchange for White. I don't get it. Like, teams are calling them, I guess, and they're trying to leverage the fact that teams are interested in a guy like that. And maybe if someone blows them away, I mean, someone came calling with 3 firsts and a real rotation player. I guess you have to listen to that on White, but I don't think they're looking to move him.
So I don't necessarily think they're looking to move him. I did
I think they're keeping every avenue open.
I find it interesting that it's being that the inquiries are there. So people are kind of, rattling the cages, which means some teams, like if you're calling, like, it's one thing to call a team that's tanking, right? And be like, can I pick your bones? It's another to call a team that's a title favorite at this point and say, could you part with a key player? Unless you're willing to come to the table with something real, right? And so the interesting part about the report is not just only that teams have come knocking, but that, and again, I'm sure you kind of pointed this out here, is that, they're saying they've set a price no one's going to meet, but they need to. He's not untouchable. Okay. One team said not untouchable, but they would need more than what they gave up to get him. So it is interesting that a price exists for Derek White. And if some team were willing to meet it, which would include a different type of player and a first, they would consider it. So it's now interesting that you're almost the possibility of undoing the White trade to get back a first round pick for another player. This is what I've always thought. When you brought Brogdon here, it did feel like a bit of redundancy. And obviously both Brogdon and Smart have shown that they can't stay on the court all the time. So they've both been hurt a bit. Smart because of his reckless style of play, and Brogdon just because he's been one of those guys that suffered injuries. Luckily, you haven't seen that from Brogdon yet this year. But White's a rock, and his versatility and his ability to play both guard positions and guard multiple positions on the floor has been huge for the Celtics. So I understand why they would want to keep him given what's gone on here. But again, if you can roll it up into something bigger and better, or do something where you might be able to get some other things back and some assets into the future, it's not a terrible thing to consider. It all comes down to how disruptive are you willing to be.
Yeah, you consider everything. I think you start these conversations to potentially have more in the offseason. I think that's how it goes this time of year. So I think the Celtics could be in position to make much more substantial changes in the summer if things don't go right this year, particularly with the offense. And White's a guy who I think increased his value this year. He's been awesome, I think. And you see the potential on a night like last night of what he could be when he's the frontline piece in an offense. And I've talked to people all year about that. Like, what's preventing him from going and getting the ball more and making plays? Because I don't love when he's just hanging around the perimeter, catching and shooting the ball.
Not one bit.
Yeah. So last night, I thought he was awesome. I think he's been great for much of this year, and his shot has improved too for much of this year outside of one cold spell. Great defense, great rotation piece. I still think they're figuring out how to perfectly use him. But I don't see them moving on from him right now, unless they're blown away. And that's sort of the nature of this deadline for the Celtics, is they're keeping everything open.
I know that, but that's what's interesting to me, Bobby, is like the narrative when stuff doesn't get done is, see, I told you they weren't going to trade anybody. But that's just because trades are hard. It doesn't mean that you're not actually looking. There's no way that the Celtics aren't looking to see what Derek White can get them, what Grant could get them, and whether or not Kevin Durant is available. Because if you're not doing that, it's just you're not doing your job. It's silly to not do that. This notion that Brad's going to be like sitting like this with his arms folded through the trade deadline because his team's good. That's not how it works.
I saw one of our commenters was like, Brad should take a vacation this week. There's nothing to do. This is a
It's
couple
not
weeks ago.
how it works. You got to shake the trees.
Yeah. And they have. I think they're looking everywhere for anything because they have some needs. And I said this a couple of days ago. they have some work to do at this deadline. I look at the roster right now and what they're getting out of the deeper end of the bench, the minutes that they're playing Jason Tatum, and their overall struggles offensively since really late November. They've gone back to some of their dysfunctional tendencies on that end of the floor. They could use some help. I think they could use a shakeup. And I think there's a lot of players on the end of their bench, Payne Pritchard, Sam Hauser up until yesterday, Danilo Gallinari, of course, who we'll get to. These guys aren't helping them much. And I know you're going to sit there and say, oh, if Smart goes down, you love having Pritchard, or if Brogdon goes down, it's great that you have Pritchard to plug in right there. If Pritchard really wants out, and it seems like that was kind of overstated in that podcast, so who knows?
I think so too.
He's certainly made his wishes known to front office, whatever those are.
Yeah.
I think you look at packaging and consolidating a little bit at the back end of the roster. I mean, you have a guy in Justin Jackson back there, not to say the 14th and 15 guys are important, but he doesn't play at all, ever. He has no role on this team. So I think you need more pieces back there, or at least one piece you can consolidate and then just find whoever to fill out the rest of the roster, much like you did last year in acquiring White, to make your rotation a little bit more foolproof come playoff time. Like, I think you're missing a ninth man right now. Like, who's the ninth man on this team?
That's the thing.
Hauser, and then he slipped.
What was the beauty of Gallinari? Exactly that.
Yeah.
That was it. The beauty of Gallinari was you got your ninth man, which was like, okay, this is a rotation that's going to be interesting. You don't have more minutes than this to give around. But if you look at the guys in the 7 through 9 spot, the minutes you're going to give them is exactly the minutes that they need. And you feel pretty good about it. And that kind of went away. And when you have an injury or two, you're rolling it up. The fact that Jason Tatum is playing 2 more minutes per game than he did last year is insane to me right now. This is something that you have to find a way around this right now.
Yep. And I know it stinks with Gallinari. I know everyone wanted to see him play here, but you're making $6.5 million and you're probably not going to play this year. It's tough. I know it's going to stink for him. I know it's going to stink for them if they do it, but it's $6.5 million to use in a trade. And he's got a player option next year that you maybe don't know if you want back on the books or not.
Right.
I'm not saying you have to get rid of Gallinari, but if there's something that makes sense, you got to do it. Because I don't think you just hold on to him on the prayer that he can play this offseason or that he's going to come back next year.
It's so unfair to Gallo.
Yeah. I think you have to explore that fully.
Of course you do. It's once he got hurt, it's Gallo's salary. He's no longer a player on the team. He's never played a minute here. I like the guy. I love the fact that he's busting his ass to get back. I love the fact that he wanted to be here. It's a real bummer if he never gets to play a game. But if he can't, you got to move on. That's just the business. There's not a matter of like fairness here,
Yeah, and when I talked to him today to get a sense of where he's at, it doesn't seem like he's close. He seems doing a lot. But he said he doesn't know whether it's going to happen or whether it's not. It's out of his control, he said. So,
yep.
And he understood too. He's been traded in the past. He understood what happened with the injury. And he even said, every team around the league and this team knows what the ACL recovery entails. So I don't think he's going to be, I know he won't be happy or thrilled about it, but I don't think he's going to be personally affronted if the team needs to do something to move on from him. He's shown that he's going to do everything he can to get back quickly. I think that shows some good faith on his part, and I'm sure they'll communicate to him what they have in mind. But he said as of today, he hasn't heard anything on the trade front. So he hasn't had any communications with the team that they're working on anything with him or that it's possible that he's going to move. So I could see it. But I know they also had hopes for him playing here at one point. So if there's nothing that makes sense, I don't think you just dump him because maybe you can get him back next year to help you. That's the beauty of those 2-year mid-levels is that you get another one this offseason and you get to keep him on the books at that figure this year too. So we'll see what happens here. I've been in favor of it if it makes sense, but it's possible that they just hold on to him if there's nothing to do with that money.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Gallinari on the deadline is as this quote here. This quote is from Bobby, who caught up with Gallo today at a community event. I've been in the league years. Whatever happens, happens out of my control, focusing on my job, taking it day by day. So again, pretty boilerplate stuff. He doesn't know, but I do believe that he would understand how this works. He's been around long enough to totally get it. He's a pro. So, if he doesn't, if he doesn't,
he was traded for Melo. He was traded for Paul George. He's been traded many times throughout his
yeah,
career.
yep. So we did want to switch gears here. A report earlier in the day, Adrian Wojnarowski. This is kind of what everyone's been waiting for, to see if the shoe would drop. And this is where, Bobby, you and I kind of thought it's headed, but it doesn't mean it's going to stay there. That the teams, they were talking today, they were meeting to talk about their future. And right now, they're not planning on trading Kevin Durant ahead of Thursday. But they talked today, and obviously that could change pretty quick. So, Durant has to like what he's hearing in order to stay. And he's got to feel okay that his boy Kyrie didn't get done dirty. And who knows what's going through his head right now. I mean, it was we had kind of guessed that one of the reasons he wanted out in the first place last year at the beginning of the year was he didn't like how they treated Kyrie, didn't give him the extension. He's like, this place is a mess. And then Kyrie gets traded of his own making, sort of, but it's also because the Nets weren't going to give Kyrie what he wanted, which is kind of similar to what happened at the beginning of the year, right? The Nets weren't going to give Kyrie a guarantee at the beginning of the year, make him play out his deal. And then halfway through the year, they were going to give him a guarantee. They were going to give him a contract that didn't have full guarantees and had stipulations in it. Kind of in the same boat, right? So if Durant didn't like it then, I don't know what he likes now. Unless just the benefit of having been around Irving for a few more months, he was like, yeah, you guys are actually right. He's a friggin' whack job. And it probably made sense to get rid of him. But I don't know where his head is at with that. He declined comment leaving the arena last night. We have no clue where Kevin Durant's head is. And the second he says, yeah, I don't want to be here anymore, it's on.
I'm sure he's not thrilled with it. But
I still think he rides it out.
Yeah. The reality is this, let's say Tuesday, 2 days for him to figure it out and for them to find a destination. And they spent a long time scouring over that last offseason, and it proved difficult to find a return that made sense for him, given his stature and given where they stand with their own draft picks being gone and all of that. So I don't think time's on their side. I think they're focusing on doing whatever they can to upgrade this roster right now, which I don't know what that would be. The Toronto thing didn't make sense to me. Any one of those players, I don't think makes sense for them right now. They need creation. They need guys that can set up Durant and make life easier for him. That's still why I'm kind of confused why they didn't take a longer look at that Chris Paul thing. But we'll see what happens here. I obviously like this roster. I understand why Durant looks at it and says this isn't what I signed up for. But I think everybody just needs to give this a chance for the rest of the season, see what they're able to accomplish, and it's much, much easier to trade Durant in the offseason. Plus, I don't think Durant has the leverage to ask out, even if he did, and that's going to make him look bad again. I think it's going to create an awkward situation when he needs to return, and he knows he's signed through 2026.
Yeah,
like there's just no. Irving was a free agent this summer. He had the ability to say, "I'm going to walk." Durant can't do that.
Yep.
So he can make a huge stink, but I think that's going to make him look worse. We know he cares about his legacy and how he's perceived. And I think he's just rolling along with this right now. He's still recovering from his injury.
I think you close the season and then see what happens next year. I think that's the play. I think that's his play. I don't think KD moves. I, in fact, don't even think there's very serious chatter in the next 2 days, but you don't know.
Yeah. And I don't love this team's potential. I mean, potential of competing with a fully formed Bucks squad or a Celtics team at its height, but you can get to these finals with the team you have if Durant's playing at his best. And then maybe you catch a break there. That's always what it takes in the postseason. I don't think
like Chris Middleton gets hurt.
Yeah, and I don't think that's substantially different than where they stood with Irving. I know they won 18-20 with him, but that was more of Durant than it was of Irving. And I think you can get a lot from Dinwiddie. I still think Finney-Smith's a huge addition. Yep. I really do. And then you have picks to play around with. So we'll see what happens.
I gotta move this along, Bobby. So I want to hit one more thing here. We don't have any. Obviously, another thing we have going on is the Celtics TPE as well. $5.9 million Dennis Schroeder. There's a few candidates you could talk about there. Nothing incredibly sexy. We were talking a little bit about Kyrie Irving.
I've always been a big Vanderbilt guy, by the way. I'm very
Yeah, a lot
interested
of
to see what
people
he's gonna
love
go
that.
for.
Talking about Kyrie Irving, Kyrie goes to Dallas today and tells his side of the story, what happened with Brooklyn. Listen here.
You know, the reporting and the journalism that was going to come out of why I left, I knew that was going to be speculation. You know, but for me personally, you know, just sitting in the seat today, I just know I want to be places where I'm celebrated and not just tolerated or just, you know, kind of dealt with in a way that doesn't make me feel respected. And there were times throughout this process when I was in Brooklyn where I felt very disrespected, and my talent, I work extremely hard at what I do. No one ever talks about my work ethic though. Everyone talks about what I'm doing off the floor. So I just want to change that narrative, write my own story, and just continue to prepare in the gym. And now that I'm in Dallas, just focus on what I can control, like I said. And you know, I'm always going to be close with those guys in Brooklyn, just like I'm close with guys in Boston, just like I'm close to guys in Cleveland. You know, it is a team competitive sport, but we care about each other's families way more off the court. So I know the relationships will extend off.
He'll always have those relationships.
Always.
He will.
Not a ton to say about it. I wanted to play it for you all here. Go check out the full press conference. We have it over at CLNS Media. We could go on and do a Bible about this, but it just doesn't really matter. But a memo, if we have any viewers from Dallas, a memo to you. We already know how this ends. Okay, the ending has been written. It is simply a matter of when that ending comes. But soak up the good rays and the good vibes right now. It's gonna go horribly off the rails sooner than later. And just
well, day one, you already had a controversy. Him deleting the apology.
Day one controversy, boom, right out of the gate. It finds out. I think it was Sam Amick. I think with the Athletic report, was it Sam Amick reported that that apology over the thing that was the controversy this year that he finally posted out there on Instagram. You know, taking accountability for the anti-Semitic stuff. It's gone. It's off Instagram. So screw you, Brooklyn. I'm out of here and I don't apologize anymore. You know, have fun with that. We got to wrap it up. As we said, we've got to get moving, but we will pop back on here should there be any breaking news later tonight. We're back for the Celtics Sixers tomorrow and a trade deadline show Thursday at 3 p.m. So make sure to check all that out. Subscribe to our YouTube channel here.
Go check out the Gallinari interview too.
And check out Bobby's Gallinari interview on clnsmedia.com. That is fresh. That is on the site. So check that out. We will be back with you guys tomorrow. Thanks for hopping